So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, guys, I'm going to be going over two bucket of tools, a Husky and a Kobalt. Now, the Husky one I actually got from my sister. She had it around her house for years, wasn't using it, asked if I wanted it. I said sure, and then I liked that one so much that I went ahead and purchased a second one. I just happened to be walking through Lowe's, and the Kobalt one was on sale for 14 bucks, so I went ahead and got it. I'm going to go over a couple things that I have in my bucket of tools that you might not have thought of that might come in handy. I'm also going to explain why I actually got these bucket of tools to begin with, and just give you an overall opinion on these bucket of tools and what you might want to look for if you're looking to get one for yourself. And most of the stuff I talk about in this video will apply to any bucket organizer you're thinking of getting, not just the Husky or the Kobalt. So in case you're not familiar with my channel, guys, I do all kinds of different DIYs, everything from electrical to plumbing to miscellaneous projects, and this goes into the main reason why I bought these bucket of tools. What would commonly happen around my house is if I was doing a project in one part of the house, I'd be making multiple trips back and forth to the garage to my toolbox to grab a different wrench or a different set of pliers, etc. And that just got really annoying, so I wanted something easy to carry around the house that had a variety of tools in it, so it would stop making me have to go for those multiple trips back to the garage. The other reason I found it so handy to have these bucket of tools is because I also will go over to my sister's house or my mom's house to do projects for them. And what I'd end up doing is just grab a plastic bin and loading it with all kinds of variety of tools out of my toolbox. And then I'd go do that project, have to come back to the house. I'd end up putting all those tools back in my toolbox, and that just got very annoying. The other thing that would piss me off when I actually went to somebody else's house to do a project is that I would end up forgetting something. So this way, everything's in those two buckets and I just grab them and I should have everything I need. The next thing I'm going to go into is why I chose to do the bucket organizers versus per se a toolbox. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first one is the cost. Neither one of these bucket organizers were more than $20 each. So even if you had to buy a bucket, you're still talking under $25 for a toolbox, basically. The next reason is I feel this bucket organizer, with all the different compartments these things have, makes it very easy to organize my tools and see what tools I need when I'm on the job. And obviously, if they're easy to see, they're also going to be very easy to grab, versus a toolbox where you open that thing up and it's just piled up on top of each other and you kind of got to dig through and figure out what you need to grab. I didn't even fit everything in this toolbox that I had in that bucket of tools, and you can see how much less organized it actually is. One question you might have is durability versus an actual metal toolbox. But I think both of these bags were pretty heavily stitched and the material seemed like it was going to hold up for a long time. The Husky one that I got from my sister, she actually had sitting outside in Phoenix, Arizona for years before I got it. And you can see that by how sun faded it actually is. And there is a couple spots on this bag that are a little worn out, but nothing that's keeping it from being used, and I think it's still going to last a long time. The only questionable thing I see as far as durability goes is the actual bucket itself, and if you have to replace that, you're out another $5. The buckets I'm actually using for these organizers is sea salt buckets from my saltwater hobby when I've had to buy salt, because these buckets are very heavily built, and I don't think they're going to fail anytime soon. However, pretty much any 5-gallon bucket will work just fine. The other thing I ended up doing, because the one salt bucket that I had, the handle was starting to crack, is that I removed the handle from the bucket, and then I found a piece of hose that barely fit over the plastic part of the handle. I ended up using some dish soap and water to lubricate it so I could work it over that plastic handle. And then I went ahead and put that handle back on the bucket, and that gave me a nice rubber handle to carry it from. Now, the reason I actually went with a second bucket is because by the time I got all my tools in this one Husky bucket, it was getting pretty overloaded, and it was starting to weigh over 50 pounds, because each one of these buckets, with the way I have them now, are 25 pounds each. And it's much easier to carry a 25-pound bucket in each hand than a 50-pound bucket in one. Now, in the last part of this video, guys, I'm going to go over what I actually have in both of these buckets. I'm not going to go over basic tools like wrenches and pliers and stuff like that, because that's just a waste of your time. What I'm going to go over is key tools that you might want to get a little better quality of, and some oddball tools that you might want to stick in there that you haven't thought about. And this is also going to tie into what you might want to look for when going to buy a bucket organizer. So I'm going to go over what I've got in this Husky organizer first. And I actually do like this Husky organizer a lot better than the Kobalt that I got. And the main reason for that is this thing's got a lot more pockets and a lot more organization than the Kobalt one does. Now, unfortunately, I did look on Home Depot's website or online in general, and I can't find this style of Husky organizer anymore. It looks like they might have discontinued this one because it is pretty old. And now it looks like the new Husky design is a lot simpler, kind of like the Kobalt one is that I got. However, I did do an Amazon search, and they do have several bucket organizers that have a lot of compartments for a very reasonable price. So here's a view of everything that I actually have in this bucket organizer, and there is plenty more compartments to expand from there. Since there's so many more compartments on this Husky organizer, one thing I really liked is being able to organize my wrenches into individual sleeves, making it much easier to grab the wrench I want instead of all of them in one sleeve and having to dig around for the size. Another feature that I do like is the fact that this thing does hold your little bits on the side of it, making them very easy to get to and convenient. Now, this is one of the things that the elastic is starting to wear out on these sleeves a little bit, and I'm not using a couple of those sleeves just because of that, but I contribute that a lot to it sitting outside for years before I actually got it. One thing you'll notice with all of my pliers is I have them with the handles down in the sleeve, and the main reason for that is so when I look at it, I can tell exactly which one I need and grab it the first time instead of digging around and going through several sleeves to find the actual thing I'm looking for. In the main compartment, I've got most of my taller tools, and I've got the tape measure on the handle. One thing I wish they would have had a little bit more of is the sleeve to hold taller tools like the one on this hammer. Just because it would have been a little nicer to have a couple more of those taller tools standing straight up instead of having to lean against the edge of the bucket. The sleeves on the inside of the bucket work well for heavier tools or tools that are taller because they won't stick too far above the edge of the bucket. There was also a small handful of heavier duty sleeves that held these bits very well, and I put the heavier ones up there so I wouldn't wear out the elastic in the other ones. So here's a quick view of what I've actually got in this Kobalt bucket organizer. So this organizer has a lot less pockets. It does have about the same amount of pockets on the inside of the bucket. However, there wasn't nearly as many sleeves and pockets on the outside of the bucket as on the Husky. And that's why I ended up using this for more of my electrical stuff, because I didn't have as many tools. So it did work out nicely for that. I also put some plumber's tape and electrical tape in here, along with some heat shrink and electrical butt connectors, and a box of drill bits, along with some miscellaneous tools like clamps and a rubber mallet. I also have some duplicates in both buckets, like screwdrivers, because if I do an electrical project, I might just want to take the one bucket and I still need some screwdrivers. As far as durability goes, I do think it's made very well and it fit over the bucket just fine, just like the Husky. And like I said before, I do prefer the Husky one just because it has a lot more compartments and sleeves in order to organize my tools. And now I'm going to go over some of the oddball tools and stuff I have in these organizers that you might not think of. So I've got a pair of automatic wire strippers. I do recommend having a regular set of wire strippers as well, because sometimes if the wire is really old, these automatic ones won't strip the coating off of the wire. But these are a lot faster if you're using fresh wire to do projects. And then I've got a pair of wire crimpers. Now these are a pair of heavy duty crimpers, and the reason for that is, if you notice how thick these are, it gives you a lot wider crimp, which will hold the wire on a lot better. And you'll also notice it's got this little dimple in it, and that gives you a good solid crimp as well. The cheaper wire crimpers won't have that dimple, and a lot of times you'll grab that wire after crimping it and you can pull it right out of the connection. I've got a heat shrink, and I keep a lighter in these because when I do my electrical connections, I like to put heat shrink over them, and then I can melt the heat shrink down onto the wiring with the lighter. This is just a thing of butt connectors for electrical work. Little magnet, comes in handy in case you drop something. Little wire brush comes in handy if you got to clean anything off, pipe fittings, etc. Just works well. Obviously a drill index would be a little more handy than this. I've just got this little Tupperware container full of drill bits that I keep in there. Density stud finder, if you're hanging anything around your house, this is an absolute must, and they're really not that expensive. Little multimeter, so I can check 120 or 12 volt DC or whatever. I use this tool a lot. I also keep a rubber mallet in there in case you don't want to ding something up, but you need to smack it with something. Rubber mallet works well. Little flashlight I got from Harbor Freight. It's got the spotlight, it's got a floodlight. Also has a hook and a magnet if you want to hang it on something. I keep a couple of these clamps in there as well. Now your normal, this is a little cheapy clamp, so it is strictly to help squeeze something. You know, these things act like a third set of hands sometimes. However, if you get one that's a little bit more expensive, you can actually pop the end off, put it on the other side, and now you actually have a spreader clamp, which comes in very handy as well. So I know channel locks are a pretty basic tool. However, I do recommend getting a decent quality pair of channel locks, because more oftentimes than not, you've got your finger in here to help you open the channel locks. And with a cheap pair of channel locks, what will happen is you'll be in this position here, and then all of a sudden your channel locks will slip and end up down here, and then you've got your finger in there. It's going to pinch the crap out of your fingers, and that's going to be the first and last time that you're going to want a cheap pair of channel locks. So the other thing I've got here is this little saw. Now this is fully collapsed, so you can't cut yourself when it's in the closed position. If you unlock it, it'll actually lock in a couple different positions. This actually comes in really handy for drywall work. And the other cool thing about it is, if you have a Sawzall, that's all this blade is a Sawzall blade. So you can put any size Sawzall blade in that saw. Now obviously you cannot collapse it with the full length Sawzall blade on it, but it will accept them. And this is by far the most used little hand saw that I've got. This is an actual oil filter wrench, but I use this more than I do a pipe wrench or a big pair of channel locks. Just the big jaws work really well for a lot of different plumbing projects. Nail pry bar, if you're doing anything with wood and you're doing it with nails, this is an absolute must. This thing works extremely well. You can get them started with this one. You got more leverage, then you flip it over to do them the final way. One of my other favorite tools is a multi-purpose tool, and what I like to call a ratcheting screwdriver that takes 1/4-inch bits. This comes in very handy as a nut driver. This is actually a Stanley, and it's done pretty well for my household projects. In my work truck, I actually have a lot better quality one, but I wouldn't go too cheap on one of these because they're pretty much useless. Then I've got some different bits and stuff that I like to keep for my drills, because these obviously go with me pretty much every project I do as well. As far as my impact driver goes, one of the key things I keep around is an extension bit, and that way if I can't reach something with just the regular bit in the impact, I can extend it out and it gives me a lot further reach. I also like these sockets that fit directly into my impact. These come in really handy for a variety of things. And I also have adapters for 1/4, 3/8, and 1/2-inch drive sockets as well. And depending on the job I'm going to do, I also carry a socket set with me. I do a lot of woodworking projects around the house, and one thing that saves me a lot of time is these drill bits that have a countersink on the drill bit. So instead of having a separate drill bit to drill the hole and then a separate countersink to make the screws go flush, it's all in one and just makes this process go a lot faster. One other thing I did decide to throw in one of my organizers is a single-use super glue and a single-use 2-part epoxy, because you never know when something like that's going to come in handy. Another good idea to throw in one of these would be some duct tape and some tie wire if you so choose. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible, so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.